Hello, hello, I'm Sasha of Sasha Makes Cards, and today I'm here with Whimsy Stamps sharing how I made this Halloween bat-themed full front shaker card using the Eek Word and Shadow die set, the Drippy Frame Die, the Batty Die Set, as well as a stamp from the Cutie Batootie Clear Stamp Set. Now, since I'm using the Eek Word and Shadow die, I decided to go with the It's Too Scary Out There sentiment from the Cutie Batootie Stamp Set, so that the full sentiment, once the card is all done, will say, "Eek, it's too scary out there," as I thought that would fit perfectly with the bat theme that I'm going for. Now, since this is also a shaker card, I'm using two different packs of embellishments from This Calls for Confetti, both of which you can find on the Whimsy Stamps website. Today I'm using the Batty Sequin Confetti and then the Red Platinum Confetti. Now, off camera, I have already gone ahead and done some die cutting and stamping just to get some of the boring stuff out of the way. I die cut the Drippy Frame Die, as well as the Eek sentiment from an alcohol marker friendly paper. I'm using 100-pound Hammermill cardstock, since, as you can see here, that I am planning on coloring them. The shadow for the Eek sentiment I die cut from a scrap piece of black cardstock. I also die cut the bats from some scrap pieces of black cardstock. As for the It's Too Scary Out Here sentiment, I stamped that onto a scrap piece of white cardstock using my favorite black ink, the Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, and simply fussy cut that out. Now today I'm coloring the Drippy Frame Die as well as the Eek sentiment using Ohuhu alcohol markers, using one of my favorite go-to red color combinations. Working from my darkest color to my lightest color, I first start with R7, then going on to R8, then R2, then R3, and lastly R1. Of course, you can always go back to where I had the color combination up on the screen to reference that. As well, the colors I am using are always in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen to make it easy to see exactly how I'm coloring and what color I am using for what. If coloring isn't one of your favorite things to do, you can of course just ink blend the Drippy Frame and the sentiment. However, I really want to give coloring it a go, and I really like how it looks in the end. I think it looks quite nice on the finished shaker card. But ink blending can also give an amazing effect, especially if you use different shades of red to kind of create a super fun gradient. As well, you can use whatever colors you want to color this Drippy Frame. I know some people have done slime, some people have made it look like icing. The possibilities really are endless, and you can use it for so much more than just Halloween cards. Now, as I'm coloring the Drippy Frame, there really is no rhyme or reason as to how I'm coloring. Whenever I color, I simply color whatever way makes sense to me, and this is the way that made sense to me. I started with the darkest color at the top of the frame on both the top half and the bottom half, made the color go lighter as it got to the drips. As for the Eek sentiment, I simply created a gradient starting from dark at the bottom, going to lighter at the top. Once I was done coloring with the alcohol markers, I then moved on to using some Prismacolor Premier colored pencils. This is something I really like to do, as it helps to add a little bit more shading and some more depth and contrast to whatever it is you're coloring. I first started using the black pencil and then moving on to a dark red. For this one, I used a pencil called Crimson Lake to help blend it out. Since I really wanted a nice range of shades, I did go in with the black. When using a black pencil crayon, you have to be careful because it's very easy to overdo it. So as long as you go in with a light hand, only really use it where necessary, it shouldn't be a problem. However, there are many times where I've overdone it a little bit, and I found that if you take an eraser very lightly, you can erase a little bit of the black pencil crayon that you've laid down on the image or whatever you're coloring to help lessen the intensity. After I am done with the black and the red colored pencils, pencil crayons, whatever you want to call it, I then went in with a white colored pencil to add some highlights to the Drippy Frame. I added the highlights on what would have been the lightest parts of the frame. So for this, it's mostly the drips and a few other small little areas. Now again, I don't know if the highlights or how I'm doing this make the most sense, but I think in the end it turned out pretty well, so I think it's all good. And here is the finished result of coloring both the ink sentiment and the drippy frame using that red Ohuhu alcohol marker color combination. I really like how it turned out, and I think it works perfectly with the bat theme that I have going on with this card. It works perfectly with the Batty Die Set, and I really like how it works overall. Now that that's done, I can move on to creating the background. Now, since this is a shaker card, the background's kind of covered up by the embellishments in the shaker. I decided to keep it pretty simple and just create an ink smushed, splattered, sprayed black background. I used some black soot distress oxide, put that onto my glass matte work surface, and did some ink smushing. Also placed it into my splat box and sprayed it with some black soot distress oxide spray. And now we can move on to the fun shaker part. So I took a sheet of acetate. You can also use just a piece of plastic wrapper, whether this is what your stamps come in or even the plastic wrapper that my acetate is in, you could use that. Whatever works for you and whatever you have laying around, you can totally use it to make a shaker. But today I decided to go with acetate since that's what I have on hand. Now, since I'm making an A2 size card, which measures 5.5 by 4.25 inches, I cut the acetate to be a little bigger than this. I ended up cutting my acetate to measure 6.5 inches by 5.25 inches. So that way, each side, when folding it onto the back, will be a whole 1/2 inch larger to accommodate for the double-sided tape that I will be using. To assemble the shaker pouch itself, I placed my card background onto the middle of the acetate sheet, and then on each edge placed a piece of double-sided sticky adhesive tape. I removed the backing of the tape from 3 out of 4 of the sides and folded the acetate over onto the back of my card background. I left the one side open so that I could pour the embellishments in through this side. Once the embellishments were in, I peeled off the backing and then folded it over onto the back of the card background like the other 3 sides. I then trimmed off the excess corners on the back just so that the shaker pouch will lay nice and flat on the card, and then continue to put some more double-sided adhesive tape on the background of the shaker pouch so that it will stay securely onto the A2 size card base. Once the shaker pouch was on my A2 size card base, I then finished off the card by gluing down all of the elements I created, including the drippy frame, the sentiment, the batty dies, using some liquid adhesive glue onto the acetate shaker pouch. And that is the completed card project. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out the description below for a complete list with links to shop of the supplies I used to create this card from Whimsy Stamps, as well as links to both my social media and the Whimsy Stamps social media. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.